Hello everyone, welcome to SUTD's Learning Sciences Lab's monthly pedagogical series. This is Nacha, Program Director of LSL. We wanted to have this in campus, but because of the COVID situation, we are online. To allow us to listen to this anytime, any place, anywhere, we have this as a pre-recorded session. This month's talk is going to be about scholarship of teaching and learning and educational research. And to present this, we have a very established educator, Professor Sandy Cook from Duke NUS Medical School. She is the Deputy Head Office of Education and also the Deputy Director of Academic Medicine Education Institute, Duke NUS. Sandy is one of the pioneers in establishing Team Lead, the team-based learning instructional program at Duke NUS. And she has been in Duke NUS since 2012. She has been recognized with numerous awards. She was accepted into the NUS Teaching Academy Fellows in 2014, and in 2016 she received the Master Scholar Award from the International Association of Medical Science Educators. So we would like to thank Sandy for taking the time and effort to prepare this presentation and also put this online for us. Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Duke NUS. Without much ado, let's move to Sandy's presentation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sandy Cook, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean and Deputy Head of Office at the Duke National University Medical School. I'm going to talk to you about Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, SOTL, and how it differs from educational research. So the goals for this presentation are to define the similarities and differences of SOTL and educational research, describe what should be the promotion criteria for educators, and discuss with you if you have any evidence of such criteria. Describe what an educational portfolio is and how it's different from a curriculum vitae, as well as talk about different kinds of domains and how you can use that to provide evidence for your impact and or promotion. Now we know an academic faculty member is expected to be a researcher, which means create new knowledge, and or a scholar seeking knowledge within their profession or discipline. They also are expected to be educators of the future generation, do administrative and service work, and in the health field where I work, also be a great clinician. They have to carry all of these roles. And when it comes to being promoted, the things that people look for in their promotion is impact, dissemination impact, which could be publications, looking at the numbers of publications, the citations, the impact factor of the journal. It also could be looking at financial impact, meaning what kinds of grants have you brought in, or patents, or drugs or devices. And of course your reputational impact. How do people know about you, either locally or internationally? Do you get invited to conferences, workshops, to do presentations? But what about educators and administrators? What can they provide that demonstrates their impact? In the late 1980s, Ernest Boyer, who was the president of the Carnegie Foundation at the time, wanted to ask that question, and he surveyed faculty in higher learning to find out where do they spend most of their time. And he found that most of their time is spent in teaching. So then he asked, did they get promoted because of their teaching, since that was such a significant part of their time? And the answer was no. So he created a series of definitions for scholarship in higher education in order to facilitate a much broader framework for faculty who are mostly educators, but allow them to think about how they can have educational impact in an academic setting and use that to help them get promoted. So his definition obviously included the scholarship of discovery, the traditional research that goes on, but he also said that one can be academic through the scholarship of integration, which is looking at the research, such as meta-analyses, systematic reviews, and get new insights from that can advise people in education. Or it can be the scholarship of education itself, creative and active learning exposures and activities that enhance and develop learning in new ways. Or the scholarship of application, which is taking the theories that people have done in integration and discovery and trying to put it into practice and demonstrate or assess whether or not it has worked. It also uses different methods and learning strategies, as well as dissemination. And that is probably one of the biggest things that many educators fail to do, which is disseminate their work. There are many ways to consider dissemination, and we can talk about that. And then the last thing is the reflection or peer review, which allows for replication, and that's tied to the dissemination. And if you don't share what you do, you don't have an opportunity to get feedback. And those are the elements that make a scholarly approach to education more impactful. So Charles Glassick decided to build off of Boyer's work and try and put that into a more concrete framework for educators, or which he called the scholarship of education. So how would you know that the work that you're doing educationally is scholarship? So obviously you have to have very clear goals, adequate preparation, appropriate methods, significant results, effective presentation of those results, and a reflective critique. So let me share with you a fun little presentation about that. I saw this and said, it said everyone, even a baby, understands what the scientific method is. And that's essentially what Boyer and Glassick tried to do, was put together a scientific method to apply it to education. Let's look at that specifically. So in education, you observe things. So what kind of problem or educational activity are you curious about? What kind of questions do you have? And then look into the literature. Has anyone else asked that question? Did they find something? Or is there something different about your question so that there's a gap in the literature? And what would you want to do in order to try and answer that question? So you form a hypothesis, and that usually is informed by the literature or by the theories from the literature, or a framework that guides the way you've put your program together. And of course, in order to do that, to make it scholarly, you need to make it testable and feasible. You can't design a program that you can't implement, so it won't help you if you're not creating something testable and feasible. And then in order to assess it, they have to be clear and measurable. So next comes the experiment, which basically is the implementation of the program that you want. So have you designed your study in a way to answer the question that you observed or asked early on? And thinking about, how do you design it? What kind of study do you use? Who are the subjects? How are they selected? What are you looking for in terms of outcomes? And how will you know that the data you collect is valid and reliable? When you're thinking about program development, you also want to think about, are you using the appropriate learning strategy that will help you achieve the outcomes and objectives that you were striving for? Then you get to analyze the data. And most people start with, do people like what I've done? But have you designed the study in the way to actually answer your questions? And are you using the appropriate methods? Are you using the right statistics? Is quantitative the right thing? Is qualitative? Those are questions that you would have to ask. And finally, you get to the reporting of your findings. So how do you share that? Now, many people think that the only way to share is through posters or presentations and publications, but it could be through this kind of medium where you've done something internally that you thought is really exciting and you share it in some sort of a local presentation, or you share it at some of the local conferences. There are many ways to share that, and that allows you to get feedback, not only for you to critique yourself for a critical reflection, but also looking at the evaluation and getting feedback from other people. Another way of sharing your results is the preparation of curricular material that you could disseminate and have people build on it, which allows for greater impact. So next I wanted to share with you about different ways that one can make an impact in education, kind of a map more or less that helps identify each of those quadrants that Glasser was looking at. So I really like this map from Kern and Medal, etc., who looked at the different ways that one could define the kinds of scholarship and of teaching and learning that they're doing. It could be systematic, and if you're doing something systematic, it's up in the top left and the top right, where you're having a scholarly teaching and a scholarship of teaching and learning. If it's private, that means you're not sharing it much beyond the internal aspects. But if it's more public, then you are able to demonstrate a little bit more scholarly work that's going on. This is a nice map to decide the different ways that you can share your work and demonstrate scholarship. The other way that people demonstrate their scholarship is through an education portfolio. You've probably heard plenty of things about that from a student's perspective, but it's also useful for an educator to develop their own portfolio. It's taken off from the artist's or an architect's portfolio, where they put together a demonstration of the work that they've done. And many people think that their CV is an illustration of what they've done, but I would describe it more as a listing of what you've done, but not how well you've done it. You can list all the courses that you've done, or all the workshops that you've gone to, or workshops that you've developed, but it doesn't tell anyone whether or not they've been impactful, whether or not people have built on it, whether or not people are appreciative of it. So the portfolio goes into much more depth and fills in a lot of that reflective critique of that. So the things that you want to think about to convince others that you are a good educator is to think about the evidence that you need to collect. And too often people don't even recognize that they have evidence or think about saving any of that when it comes to trying to build their portfolio and share with others about what they have done. So think about that, the kinds of evidence that you have and which kinds you want to collect. And then think about how you have developed the things that you're doing and whether or not you've used the best practices and how you've disseminated it and shared it. So when we build our portfolio, we have asked people to provide a brief narrative. The CV includes all the details, but in the portfolio it's a narrative highlighting a few illustrative examples that provide evidence of not only the quantity of things that you're doing, but the quality. And the quality can be through student or peer evaluation, feedback that's gotten, supportive letters, invitations to teach the program elsewhere, evidence that people have built upon that, and that will help define the kinds of scholarship and sharing and dissemination efforts put together. Another way I like to think about scholarship is how you've drawn information from the community. So that would be the literature, best practices, colleagues even, locally or internationally, and how you've then used that information to contribute back to the community. So how have you disseminated your information, whether it's locally or internationally? I belong to an organization called the International Association of Medical Science Educators, and they've been working on this idea of a portfolio for quite a long time, and I really urge you to take a look at this because it has been put together in a way to provide a lot of clarity and examples of the kinds of things that one might put into the educator portfolio. It's built upon several frameworks. We at the Duke National University of Singapore program use the Academy of Medical Educators. This one from the International Association of Medical Science Educators use something similar, and it's these 5 domains where you want to demonstrate your scholarly approach in teaching, learning assessment, curriculum development, advising and mentoring, as well as leadership and administration. So the way they put the book and the package together is there's a description of the domain and some types of measures of quantity as well as quality that I've illustrated earlier as an important part of building your portfolio. Then as you grow in your scholarly approach, you can then look at the criteria that they've illustrated in each of these domains to demonstrate that engagement with the education community. And those who are interested in really taking it up to another level, then they've provided illustrations of the scholarship of education within that particular domain. And usually that's at that much higher level of peer-reviewed and dissemination and contribution. So here's an example within the teaching aspect. So you can see that on the left-hand side, this is under informed preparation. So one might go through it and say, have I consulted the literature? Have I reviewed other tests? Have I gone to a professional development activity that taught me how to do this? How have I learned about this? And then these are some examples of how someone might put into their portfolio demonstrating that they were prepared effectively in order to do the teaching that they're describing in their portfolio. Now, I often get asked the question of who needs to develop an education portfolio, and many people are using it because of their academic promotion requirements, but not everybody does. There's also room for the portfolio to provide evidence even in an annual performance review when you want to say to your supervisor that these are the kinds of things that I'm doing in education and I want to share with you how impactful it has been. Or you just want to provide for yourself a demonstration of a commitment and impact of your educational activity. The other question is, why do I want to have an impact? And I would say mostly to start with curiosity. Are you sure you're using the best practices? Are you really making a difference? Does the course or the material that you've put together really have achieved the goals that you're doing? Could you do it better? And of course, the recognition and promotion. Talk too fast. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. Thank you.